Are the Dallas Cowboys telegraphing what they're going to do in the NFL draft with their 30 visits? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
on. Locked on. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are taking a look at the Cowboys' 30 visits and seeing what these names tell us because, gotta say, Landon, seems pretty clear what the Cowboys intend to do in this draft.
Yeah, it's what I really love is that, you know, every day on this show, as everydayers know, we have 3 segments on this show, and so the Cowboys so neatly decided to basically just target 3 different position groups, which fit nicely with our show format. So thank you so much, Will McClay, for kind of lining things up for us. We certainly do appreciate it.
Yeah, it makes it very, very easy to do a show. So let's start at the running back position, which coincidentally is the position that the Cowboys have shown the most interest in, the most prospects. What I found interesting is that they're basically covering their bases with all of the top running backs, including Jonathan Brooks, who is a Dallas Day guy, Trey Benson, Braylon Allen, Bucky Irving, Amani Bailey, Jace McKellen, Tyrone Tracy, and Rasheen Ali. The only name on this list that I would like to see is Jalen Wright. We don't know if he is or isn't going to be a 30 visit, but it does seem like Cowboys are meeting with all the running backs here.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because the tease that you did at the beginning of the show was basically, you know, are the Cowboys telegraphing their potential draft pick with these 30 visits? I mean, honestly, I would go upstream a little bit and say, are the Cowboys telegraphing their 30 visits with their free agent strategy, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's pretty clear that they're hitting the spots that we know that they have huge holes in, right? So they hit the running back group pretty heavily, basically every top running back, like you mentioned, except for Wright. And I wouldn't be shocked if like they had some kind of, you know, meeting at the combine with him, or, you know, just obviously they met with him at the combine.
I think he was at the Senior Bowl. He didn't practice, but I
Yeah.
believe he was there. You know, maybe that was a good chance for the Cowboys to meet him as well at the top of the combine, just to be.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a feeling that they didn't just completely miss him. I have a feeling they found another way to kind of get a hold of him. So, and yeah, clearly they're taking a look at all these guys because they have a need here, and they're going to be drafting a running back in the draft, and they want to get a good grip on exactly, you know, who kind of, you know, I think for the running back position especially, I would bet that they probably like a bunch of these guys, like 4 or 5 of them, and are cool with drafting, you know, several of these guys. So I think it's more about kind of getting your hands around who each one of these guys are, and if they're available at your pick, are you comfortable with drafting them and you know, giving them a hefty percentage of the rock the next season?
I'm also wondering, Landon, like, is there a good chance that the Cowboys just draft multiple of these guys? Because we've seen them do this in the past, whether it was it the Ezekiel Elliott draft? They drafted Zeke and Darius Jackson. The Tony Pollard draft, and thinking off the top of my head, they drafted Pollard, and was it Mike Weber that year? Even you go back to like 2008, that's where they drafted Felix and Tashard Choice. Like, I could see a situation where, let's say they draft Braylon Allen from Wisconsin, but they feel like they need to get a passing down back to go with him. Maybe that's where somebody like Amani Bailey or Rasheen Ali is like, hey, this is a 6th-round running back that we're going to bring in, and both these guys are going to fill roles.
Yeah, I think that's certainly possible. You know, that they, I mean, like you mentioned, they've done it before. We know that they're not going to be leaning exclusively on one running back. So, you know, if they feel like they need to get 2 kind of types to kind of fill out the skill set of the running back room, I wouldn't be shocked at that at all. And frankly, you know, that's could explain a lot of this targeting that we're seeing in the 30 visits. I think for me, you know, and we'll talk about the kind of other folks that are at positions that are not in these three groups here in a little bit. But for me, it seems pretty clear that what they're trying to do is that they want to hit these three positions, right, in the draft. And the reason they're kind of, spamming these positions in the 30 visit is because they want to have options, right, in multiple windows to select these guys. They don't want to be beholden to take a running back at 56 or in the third round or in the fourth round, or I guess not the fourth round, but in the fifth round. They want to be able to remain open, and if something happens and something falls to them, to be able to wait around on, oh well, you know what, we were going to take running back here, but Malachi Corley fell to us at 56, so we feel like we want to take him here. Now we need to see, okay, let's look back at our list. Who do we like that's going to be in our next window of draft picks? And I think that's, a smart way to do it. It's like, look, you clearly are going to try to fill these positions with in the draft, which obviously is not the smartest approach to getting the best player, right? To draft for need. But if you're going to draft for need, which, every team does draft for need, at least a small percentage every year. But if you're going to draft for need, you do it this way. You spam the positions that you want to find out all the different talent at the different rounds and what the windows are for when you expect them to be selected. And then you kind of let the draft play out and then see who falls into each window and then try to draft them like that.
Want to mention, just because the Cowboys bring in somebody for a 30 visit doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to draft him or even interested in drafting that player, right? Like sometimes you bring in a player just to make sure that you're going to cross him off. Like, hey, we heard that some of the interviews were bad or there's some off the field stuff. Let's bring him in. Okay, it was as bad as we thought. He's officially off our board. So I got to believe of this, what is it, 9 running backs they brought in, probably 6 of them they really like, and maybe 3 of them they're just bringing in to see. Yeah, cross-check.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, we kind of get myopic because the Cowboys have had such a strong tradition of drafting from their 30 visits. I think we've actually seen that trend kind of move away a little bit. It's not as per the line on as it used to be. But I think that there is obviously a strong correlation to the fact that they are spamming 3 positions and what that indicates, right? And yeah, I think that, like, that's a good thing to remember, is that it's not just about, hey, and that's, again, you see guys like Jim Nagy who are complimenting you on dropping the top in the 30 visit. I it's funny. I never even noticed when they added top to the 30 visit. I never understood. I guess I don't understand why they would ever add it, but yeah, and I think that that's an important note because sometimes you're bringing these guys in because you just don't have enough information on them. Correct. Right. And like, you need to have more information. And sometimes, like you mentioned, that's not positive information that you've got on these guys. And then you get it in there and you confirm that negative information. So yeah, it's not always a case that these guys are the 30 most interesting candidates for being a Dallas Cowboy, according to the front office. It's usually a case that they're interested in these guys, but it can also be a case where they need to do a little bit more due diligence. They need to know a little bit more about this guy. Maybe there's a situation where, hey, this guy's got great tape. He's got great numbers. His athleticism is great, but we've heard that he's a real jerk. We've heard that he doesn't take to coaching well, that he's not incredibly intelligent. And so you want to get him in the room and have a conversation with him or get him on the board. And that takes being in front with a person, and not always it can be accomplished, with a Zoom meeting or that sort of thing.
Yes. Should also mention the Cowboys are one of the few teams that don't draft 30 visit guys like at a ridiculous rate in the first round. There's other teams that, like, they won't select a guy in the first round that they don't have a 30 visit with. Where we actually see the trend for the Cowboys is like day 3 and undrafted free agency. A lot of times what they're trying to do with these guys is like, hey, come look at our facility. This is what you could get if you decide to sign with us as an undrafted free agent, right? And we've seen this with like Marquise Bell, Wande Thomas was a 30 visit. Some of the linebackers they've signed have been 30 visits. Like, they're trying to sell them on the idea of signing with the Cowboys. So to me, that's almost the more interesting thing is the later fringe guys. Devin Harper, I remember, was a 30 visit. So keep an eye on that second list of running backs, which Amani Bailey, who I think is a late day 3 pick, Rasheen Ali, who is coming off a torn pec. He could be an undrafted free agent. Jason McClellan is another one. I would be surprised if the Cowboys are bringing in those running backs to potentially try to get them to come sign as UDFAs.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that applies to all these positions too, but yes, absolutely, specifically the running back position, just because you can get a contributing running back or a contributing rookie running back in
Yes.
undrafted free agency. That's possible. Whereas other positions, you don't see that, those kind of players in undrafted free agency, especially rookies, kind of moving the needle. Rookie running backs, even in undrafted free agents, on a regular basis, come in and contribute. Maybe not 1,000-yard rushers, but contribute as a change of pace back or
Many
or
guys.
something to
Yeah.
kind of help the offense. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Let's talk about some first round candidates because we're not drafting any of these running backs at pick number 24. Let's look at the offensive linemen that the Cowboys are bringing in next. This episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar that you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar that you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold from 1 year from the date of your first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Landon, let's talk about the offensive linemen that the Cowboys are bringing in for the 30 visits because I really like this list.
Yeah, it's a good list. I mean, these are guys that we've talked about in some form or another. I mean, we definitely need to go over Kingsley Sumata, who another guy that I actually really like that we haven't really done a deep dive on. Matt Goncalves was a guy that I wasn't familiar with that I definitely need to kind of go back and watch a little bit more of. But the rest of these names are guys that we've talked about and we really like, right? Like obviously Fuaga and Powers Johnson and Barton are folks that we've covered that we really like. So I think, it's clear that a tackle offensive line is I mean, that's no surprise to anyone, maybe even less of a surprise than running back, that's going to be kind of a target of the first round. And these are names of like, at least those top three are all guys that are, I would say, definitely going to be first rounders, or at least very, very, very likely to be first rounders. And then Kingsley Sumata, you and I were just talking about it. There's a chance that he kind of sneaks in there too. So, they're clearly targeting a kind of. It seems like they're targeting less windows with the offensive line. They're pretty much kind of focused on the top. And then obviously, I think Goncalves is the guy. Calves is the guy that they would potentially maybe target as we talked about a double dip at running back. Maybe they think about double dipping at tackle, or maybe what they do is, you and I had discussed, maybe they're comfortable with one of the other younger guys at tackle. Maybe they draft a Jackson Powers Johnson at 24. They hit some other positions they don't get to tackle. Maybe they come back later and get Goncalves as a guy that can be another developmental tackle, and to kind of just give you better odds on hitting on one of these guys. So
What's interesting is, again, this is not a complete list of the 30 visits. We wanted to make sure that we only included players that were verified, that have either visited or are visiting, because one of the names that has been mentioned is like Troy Fatanu, from the left tackle from Washington. Wouldn't be a surprise at all if he is a visit, but haven't got any official word yet. No pure left tackles here. Like Graham Barton is a left tackle at Duke. he's not playing left tackle in the NFL. Jackson Powers-Johnson, Graham Barton, both interior players. Fuaga's interesting because he was a right tackle at Oregon State. Like, are they considering the idea of switching him to left tackle? Could he be somebody that maybe kicks inside to guard in the NFL? And then Kingsley Sumata is a right tackle, I think, only in the NFL. It's just interesting to me, Landon. Like, I thought that they would be maybe hunting more of the left tackle types, and maybe they are, but we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly they're trying to keep things open, and I will point out that it feels like, especially these top guys, it seems like they are targeting the top guys that are the guys that have position flex, right? Like, so there's no Mims here, there's no Tyler Guyton here, there's
Patrick Paul.
No Patrick Paul. No, these are all guys. I mean, Sumatea, like, a little bit later. I mean, I think he's probably, like you said, probably a tackle only. But Barton, Jackson Powers-Johnson, Fuaga, and even if Fatanu is on this list, he
can play guard.
Yeah. I mean, he could easily play guard. So I do think that it does appear that they are kind of more exclusively in the first round looking at the more position flex type guys than the I guess I would call the other type developmental tackle type, right? Because that's really the only other type of tackle that's available when they pick. Now, if Olu Fashanu fell to them, I don't know that.
We've seen him fall a little bit on the consensus board, but maybe the Cowboys just don't feel like it's all that realistic. That even if he falls to pick 20, you still have to get through several other teams that need left tackle help. But I would also
argue that these, the other argument you could make here is that, some of these guys that are at the top, they don't get put on this list because, the Cowboys have a ton of information on them, right? Like, they're well-known prospects. They're well scouted throughout the years. They probably have been getting reports on, Olu Fashanu since he was in high school, so I think that there is a certain amount of, like I said, of discovery that's actually happening in these 30 visits. It's not just a formality. So maybe the reason that they're bringing in the kind of tweener guys is to kind of see them a little bit up close and kind of get a feel for whether you think that they could actually play multiple positions or if they're kind of, truly stuck in the spots that you saw them play in college.
I do want to mention one other thing. So Jordan Morgan is not a 30 visit for the Cowboys as of now. It has not been reported, but the Cowboys did have a private workout with him already this offseason. So there is interest there. They also met with him at the Senior Bowl because he was there practicing at the Senior Bowl, and they met with him at the Combine. So while he's technically not a 30 visit list guy, I got to believe that they're still very interested in him.
Another position flex guy, another guy that could play inside or outside. So, and again, which lines up with what our known philosophy for the offensive line is with Mike McCarthy, is that he likes these guys who can play multiple spots. So, not surprising. And again, great player. I think there's a reason that he's being looked at. And I do think that it seems like these top offensive linemen that are on this list all have that in common, of the ability to play multiple spots on the offensive line.
So we're going to talk about linebackers in segment 3, but to me, it seems very clear that the Cowboys would like to come out of the first 3 rounds with an offensive lineman, probably an interior offensive lineman, a running back, and then a linebacker. So figuring out how to sequence that the best is going to be challenging. But the more that I look at the 30 visit list, the more that I feel like, the Cowboys are trading down from 24. Like, I think it's very possible they can move from like 24 to, let's say, 28. Buffalo drafted 28.
I was just going to say, yeah.
And you slide down, and maybe you only pick up a 3rd or 4th round pick. Maybe what you do is a pick swap where, hey, we'll take your 2nd and you give us your 3rd, and we'll give you our 3rd, right? So now we have 2 2nd round picks. It feels very much to me like the Cowboys are going to try to figure out a way to get a Jackson Powers-Johnson, a Junior Colson, and then a Braylon Allen with their first 3 picks.
We could do a whole podcast on this subsection right here, but I do wonder how the analytic team that is now kind of fully in place here, and I really do feel like this is kind of the first offseason that they've been allowed to a little bit flex their muscle, right? I wonder how that feeds into the Cowboys' desire to trade back, right?
Yes.
Like, if anything, they're promoting that, trying to help them get through the numbers to understand what
Yes.
value is. I do hope that is the case. And I think you're right, because I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, a lot of these names that we're seeing are all kind of targeted in areas where, again, going off consensus board, that the Cowboys don't have picks, like, so
It's strange. Yeah.
it is a little strange. And I do think, yeah, I mean, honestly, that was the first thing that came to my brain when the Diggs trade announcement came down yesterday. And it was that after, oh goodness, the Diggs boys are going to play each other in a Houston versus Dallas situation, which I think is hilarious and going to be amazing. But after that, the Bills would probably be pretty strong candidates to potentially move up if the wide receiver fell to them.
Yep.
Which, I think the Cowboys are in kind of a spot where if you wanted to get that kind of the end of that second tier of wide receivers, the Cowboys
Yeah.
might be in a pretty prime spot. If Brian Thomas fell, or
Or Xavier
if they
Worthy.
really like Worthy. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So I do think that the Cowboys suddenly had a little bit more opportunity to trade back after yesterday's transactions.
All right, let's look at the linebackers the Cowboys are bringing in, because they're bringing in every single one of them. Like, they're completely covering their bases at the linebackers position. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minutes for tickets for sports, concert, comedy, and theater tickets. Save even more with an exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the winning formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are looking at the Cowboys' 30 visits that have been announced so far. And let's get to the linebacker position, Landon, because it's Edgerrin Cooper, Peyton Wilson, Junior Colson, Trayvon Wallace, Nathaniel Watson, and there's also another one, Jordan McGee, who they're bringing in from Temple. That's a lot of linebackers.
It is. It's and obviously this is a position that the Cowboys have clearly prioritized this offseason. And that was something that we have been hearing, from the beginning, is that clearly the linebacker room was going to change based on the change in defensive coordinator. Usually the Cowboys are, and we've talked about this before, usually the Cowboys kind of give their new coordinators a season before they start try to hit them up and fill out their coffers with players that they like. I kind of feel like the linebacker position was just in such dire straits in comparison to where it needed to be for Zimmer, that they kind of had to break protocol here a little bit, right? I don't, not to say that the linebackers on this team are so terrible or anything. I think it's just very much against type, right? Versus what Zimmer wants to use. And so, you can't necessarily, I don't know that we're going to necessarily be able to count on Marquise Bell in the ranks of a linebacker as far as, distributing snaps. So I think that this is why that you're looking at bringing in all these guys, right? And again, like I think this is another list that you're seeing kind of windows here, right? Like Edger and Cooper and Peyton Wilson and really Junior Colson in some ways are all kind of day 2, day 3 guys, like depending on where you like them, Peyton
round
Wilson.
2 or day 2 guys, probably more like round
Yeah,
2.
sorry,
round
I
3
keep
guys. Yeah.
yes, day 2 guys, round 2 and 3 guys. I think that you see these kind of stretch from all the way to the top of the second round. I've seen Cooper taken in some. I've seen Peyton Wilson in some mocks taken at the high part of the second round, and really Colson too. I've seen these guys kind of taken all throughout the second and third round. All the way, I think I've seen them. One of them, two of them end up in the fourth round, and then guys like Trevin Wallace, who we've been hearing kind of whispers about the Cowboys potentially liking for a little while, and Nathaniel Watson, the Mississippi State guy. These are guys that are later round, later windows guys, and then the Temple kid too, Jordan McGee.
Yep.
I think again another kind of late round free agent type guy. They clearly want to add numbers to the position. Like we talked about before, that some of these spots, right? Like offensive tackle, I feel like really offensive tackle, it feels like, if they get out of the first or second round and they don't have a guy, then is there a point in adding a guy, right? Like at that point, I think for linebacker, they do need numbers. And so I have a feeling that even if they didn't get a guy in the day 2 or 3, they probably still would target a guy a little bit. I think linebacker and running back are very similar in that sense, that I feel pretty confident that they're going to come out of the draft with at least one at the position, maybe 2 when you count undrafted free agency.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around, like, how do the Cowboys get, let's say, a top 3 linebacker in this class: Cooper, Wilson, Colson. I think that's in some order. And then a top 3 running back. And then on top of grabbing, let's say, an offensive lineman in round 1, like, how do you accomplish that with only 3 picks inside the top 100? Is it by using some future draft capital, because the Cowboys are expected to get some comp picks next year to, maybe move up from the 3rd round to go get a running back? Is it dropping back in round 2 to the early part of the 3rd round, picking up more draft capital? I don't know, but I feel like there's going to be a run on linebackers like right before the Cowboys pick, because Philadelphia needs linebacker help. Cleveland needs linebacker help. Miami needs linebacker help. I just don't know how they plan on accomplishing this.
Yeah, I mean, I think again it kind of points back to your idea of maybe they're planning on trading around, or maybe they're planning on having some of these guys kind of fall into spots that they're not expected to go. I mean, look, Peyton Wilson could go anywhere.
Oh, that's the one I have no feel on where he's
no idea where Peyton Wilson's going. I would not be shocked if he got picked at 30. I would not be shocked if he got picked at 65. Like I wouldn't be shocked if he got in the 5th round, like, because there was some knee thing that we just weren't aware of. I mean, the guys had so many surgeries that it's like, so I think that and even a guy that doesn't have those kind of unknowns to his game, like Junior Colson, like, I mean, it's a pretty wide gap from like top of the 2nd to like bottom of the 4th. I mean, that's a huge gap, and that feels like that's where he could go, right?
I also wanted to say that last year was weird for linebackers because, like, Trenton Simpson was somebody who a lot of people liked from Clemson that was getting like 1st round buzz.
Yeah.
He fell to the very end of day 2. Like the Ravens grabbed him right before Dallas did with Overshown. Deion Henley, who I think Daniel Jeremiah had as the number 1 linebacker in the class, fell all the way to the bottom of the 3rd round. So is the NFL just devaluing linebackers even in the draft, or because there's such a lack of linebacker talent in the NFL, could this be a year where these guys all get pushed up and you see Edger and Cooper go late round 1, or Junior Colson goes in the 40s? I just have no feel with this linebacker group.
I kind of feel like the teams are starting to become a little bit more specific what they're looking for in their linebackers, and that's really hurt the kind of draft stock of some of these guys. Because, look, if Edger Cooper goes in the 2nd round, that's because, like, it's likely that 28 of the 32 teams like him and his skill set, right? But if you don't match what your like, let's say let's try to get a specific guy like Peyton Wilson, right? Or or let's just use Junior Colson, because like we just talked about, like his wide range, right? If you're trying to get, let's say you're Dan Quinn, right? You're in Washington, right? And you're looking for a linebacker. Are you going to look at Junior Colson as a second round pick in your system? I don't think so,
No,
right? Like you're going to view him as a fit in your system a little bit later. And I think that the linebackers are kind of falling victim to this more than they have in the past. You're starting to see a wider range of the type of body types that you're getting at linebackers. A lot of them are, the position has gotten a lot lighter the last few years, obviously, as we've adjusted the passing game. And then as that trend is starting to spin back around, you're starting to see teams become more heavy. I think there's going to be a trend towards bigger linebackers as well. So I think that what that's doing is that's splitting the class in half. And because of that, like there isn't as much of a drive to move people's stock up, because, if there aren't 20 teams clamoring for that type of linebacker, then the chances that you get drafted in the second, that someone's going to reach on you in the second round when they know that you're not qualified to play for linebacker for half the teams, they're probably going to wait until a little bit later and see how that falls and still get a quality guy. So I do think the linebacker room is very interesting in the last few years. And I wonder if we don't continue to see just kind of, I don't know if it's necessarily like a devaluation of the position. I think it's more just a fracturing of how NFL teams are viewing linebackers, and that thereby kind of causing each individual player to lose a certain amount of value because they may not be necessarily the template that team is looking for in their linebackers.
So we're going to continue to fill you guys in on the 30 visits once we get more information, because assuredly we're going to get a couple guys over the weekend. We'll get some more over the next week or two. So make sure that you're downloading the Locked On Cowboys podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Wanted to let everybody know on Friday, we're going to do another mock draft simulation. You guys have been loving those this offseason. On tomorrow's mock draft, we're going to be trading down in round one.
Right.
We talked about the potential of the Cowboys doing that. We're going to execute a small trade back to see how that helps the Cowboys accomplish some of their goals. So make sure you guys tune in for that. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.